Hello everybody, Jake Raby here, Flat 6 Innovations. I want to welcome you back to another RenVision technical video, and today I'm fired up. And the reason why is because I'm getting to share a lot with you guys about lifters ticking. And the reason I'm so fired up is because I'm going to be able to share this video with at least 5 people per week who send me a submission ticket through flat6innovations.com that says my Porsche has bad lifters, or my lifters are ticking, or even better, my lifters were replaced because they were ticking and the engine is still ticking, because that wasn't your problem. So join me for this technical series that you're going to want to watch. So before I jump into this, I'm going to share a story with you. This is a story that I tell almost everybody that ends up with me in a technical phone chat because they have lifters ticking. And this goes back to a customer in Virginia who is in the Navy. And of course, I'm a Marine, so I wanted to help the guy out. He's on active duty. And he was taken advantage of because the shop that was doing the work, that was actually a Porsche dealer, was not able to adequately diagnose or treat his condition after doing many different things to the engine. So before he was deployed, he called me and said, hey, I'm getting ready to go overseas. My Cayman S 2006 has been making a ticking sound, and it's at the Porsche dealer, and it's having the lifters replaced. And I said, okay, well, how was it diagnosed? And I already knew what the problem was, or more than likely what it was, and that was bore scoring. But he said, you know, they listened to it, they did this, they did that, it was a classic lifter problem, so I gave them authorization to go ahead and do this while I'm on deployment. I said, okay, well, have they started it yet? And he said, yes, they started it. At least they have the process underway, the engine's out of the car. I said, okay, well, maybe that was it, but if it's not, then let me know when you get back. I never even bothered telling him that he may have bore scoring or may have another problem, because I didn't want him to be worried while he's floating around the world for 6 months that they weren't going to be able to fix the problem. I know how that is. I've done that myself. So he comes back home after he's deployed for 6 months, and he says, I picked the car up and drove it for a little bit, and the problem was still there. So I took the car back. Now, at this point, he had taken the car back to them, and they had already gone back into it. So he's calling me after they had a second chance. So the first chance, they did the work. He goes and picks the car up. He still hears the noise. He takes it back to them. I said, okay, so what did they do the first time? He said, well, they changed the lifters, and it was still doing it. And then they now are changing the camshafts, okay? What they were doing were firing the parts cannon at it, right? They didn't find a smoking gun because that wasn't the problem. So I wish he would have contacted me right when he found out that he still had the problem, because I would have informed him what the problem was. So the problem is now he has spent $14,000 and the problem is still not fixed. It's doing the exact same thing. All of the lifters were replaced, which is what you see here, and there's some exhaust lifters that are pulled out of this carrier. They were all replaced, as well as his camshafts, and they had the same result. And the reason is that these were not his problem. So the big problem here is this sailor had been deployed for 6 months, saving all of his money, trying to fix the car. He gets back and the car's not fixed. $14,000 later, he's out of money, and he can't get a loan to fix the car. And I said, okay, well, I've always got a list of people wanting to buy these cars, so maybe I can help you sell it, because he was just done. And this happens a lot. The car becomes bankrupt, okay? It's no different than a car that's totaled from a collision. It has no value because the engine is the value of the vehicle. So I said, I think I can diagnose this in 10 minutes. I believe your problem is bore scoring, and I can conclusively find it within 10 minutes. Car shows up. Literally, I pull out a couple spark plugs, throw it on the lift, stick a borescope in, boom, cylinder 6 scored severely. Found the problem. I connected him with a guy that was willing to buy the car. The person bought the car and immediately got in line with us to have us reconstruct the engine. So the sailor lost everything, and the new guy took advantage of that. One man's trash is another man's treasure, right? That's basically what ended up happening. And we see this happen a lot. So at the end of the day, this misdiagnosis was a huge problem. And this misdiagnosis has happened to hundreds of people with bore scoring issues. I hear it happen all the time. And the reason why is because a faulty cylinder that's got scoring, okay, has the exact same rhythmic tone and pulse as a bad lifter. Most seasoned Porsche engine builders and technicians that did not have direct experience with cylinder bore scoring and these engines extensively would misdiagnose that and swear that they were right. And with other engines, they would be right. And the reason why I can tell you that this ticking sound that is very confusingly similar to that of a lifter is so easy to misdiagnose is because I've done the same thing. I did this 15, 18 years ago. I made the wrong call. I had to eat it. I swapped the lifters. I swapped this. I swapped that. The noise was still there. What was the noise? The noise was bore scoring. And I had to eat it because I don't make my customer lose $14,000 and be able to sleep at night. So if you follow our Focus on Bore Scoring series, I go over in the first few parts of that the reason why the scored cylinder and the piston that has become physically damaged from the scoring, why it makes that same tone, the reason why it has the exact same pulse and rhythm as what you would have if you had a bad lifter. If you go to part 4 of that series of Focus on Bore Scoring, we let you listen to that with an engine that has confirmed bore scoring from under the engine with a stethoscope, okay? You will hear that the sound is exactly like a lifter if you are a seasoned technician or an enthusiast that knows what bad lifters sound like, okay? So the reason why this is often misdiagnosed is that it has all those characteristics and is so confusingly similar. The one thing that I will tell you, and the point that I want to drive home today, is that the lifters in these engines do have problems. They will become sticky. But when they fail, in my direct experience, they lead to misfires. And they lead to misfires before you will physically hear a sound. So I'm going to say that again. I want to drive this point home. You will have misfires that are measurable from your onboard diagnostic system, and sometimes you will even feel those misfires before you have any audible symptoms from a lifter in these engines. And the reason why is because they do not fail in a position where the lifter is collapsed. They fail in a position where the lifter is extended. Therefore, instead of creating lash, which is basically extra clearance between the camshaft and the lifter, they actually will hold the valve open with negative lash. And that is what creates a misfire. So that is really the way these lifters will fail in these engines. Now there's 2 different kinds of lifters that are used. There's a conventional lifter, which is just a flat tappet, that's a regular mild hydraulic. And then we have the Variocam Plus lifters, like you see here, that have 2 separate pieces, okay? And this is on the intake side of the Variocam Plus engines, which would basically be all your 911 variants post 2001. It would be your Boxster S only after 2007, so your 2007 and 2008, and it would be your Cayman S 2006 through 2008. All the engines I didn't mention do not have these lifters, okay? But they can all have misfires despite what type of lifters are used in the engine. But across the board, we do not hear any of these lifters making an audible tick when they fail. I've only heard that one time in 18 years, and you probably won't hear it either. So there are some other things that can play into the operation of an engine that has a confusingly similar tick to that of a bad lifter and not be bore scoring. There's just a couple of them, okay? The most common one is a loose spark plug. The coil pack will kind of hold that spark plug captive, won't really ever let it come out of the cylinder head, but it will allow it to go out on compression and try to come back in on the intake stroke. And that results in a tick, 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 tick as the spark plug is moving in the cylinder head. So if you hear a ticking sound, check the torque on your spark plugs, okay? Follow the recommendation for that. If you find a loose one, pull it out and inspect it, because maybe it has started to rip the cylinder head threads out that hold the spark plug in. We've seen that happen before, and then it'll never hold torque again, and you've got to have that repaired. So a loose spark plug is one of the things that can lead to a ticking sound from the engine that is confusingly similar to that of a failed lifter or a noisy lifter. So the second thing that can play into this is an exhaust leak. So on your exhaust manifold where it meets the cylinder head, especially if you have a bad gasket or if you have a performance exhaust system, a lot of times those exhaust systems do not have flat flanges on them. A lot of the stuff is made overseas of questionable material integrity and machining, and they're not Blanchard ground, and because of that they're not flat, and it makes the gaskets not seal up properly. And some of those gaskets are questionable quality as well. So a ticking sound can also come from an exhaust leak. Now, it don't have to be at the cylinder head. It can be at any of the junction points throughout the exhaust system. You can also have a cracked exhaust manifold that will tick. You also have sometimes a cracked catalytic converter that will tick. So those things are pretty easy to diagnose. You will see some black carbon usually around the area where the leak is because you're leaking some exhaust as well as having that ticking sound. Sometimes it will be picked up by an oxygen sensor because it sees there's a lean mixture because you're pulling in unmetered ambient air, okay? Does not happen all the time, but it is something, again, that is confusingly similar to that of a lifter tick. So the third thing does not specifically apply to the M9X series of cars from 97 to 08. That's the focus of this video. But I've got to cover it because people are going to search and they're going to think that, does this apply to my engine too? So if you have an engine that has direct injection, be it a Macan, a Cayenne, any 911 variant, anything post-2009 that was direct injected from the Porsche family, you could have injectors that are making noise. These injectors are in the combustion chamber, especially if you have any extra chamber filling, if you've done modifications to the engine, anything like that. A lot of times it will make those injectors run louder. That is a noise that is also confusingly similar to that of a lifter tick. So sometimes you can diagnose that by putting a stethoscope in that area, listening to it, but to me it is a much different sound than the bore scoring sound or the lifter tick that's really a lifter tick or a loose spark plug or an exhaust leak. Injectors have their own sound to a trained ear. To an untrained ear, it can be confusingly similar to that of a lifter. So in my experience, if you actually do have a lifter problem, the precursor to that will end up being misfires. Not in every case. There's always variables, so don't ever hold me to that, right? Everything is different with every case. But in most cases, you're going to have a misfire that either you feel when the engine first fires up, especially when it's cold, or you're going to end up having an interrupted exhaust note. You're going to hear that lifter is not doing its job with chamber filling. If you go to the back of the car, instead of having a nice type of exhaust note that's very, very constant and repetitive, you're going to have a bop, 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 bop like that. You can take a piece of paper sometimes or your hand, put it right over the tailpipe, and it's going to have an interrupted type of feel. And a piece of paper will show you that, right? You can also feel it with your hand. Sometimes you can feel on a 911 variant especially that has, a partitioned exhaust, put one hand over each bank. And every now and then you'll feel an interruption. That is when that lifter is not sealing off correctly and it's causing an imbalance in the combustion cycle, okay? And that's what you want to pay attention to. A lot of times that is what causes the misfire, all right? We've even seen engines that need an oil change do this. We've seen engines that don't like a particular oil do this. That oil will be too thick or too thin, and it affects the hydraulic nature and tendencies of the lifters. Sometimes we have to change oil to get that to go away, okay? So usually you're not going to have the noise associated with those. You're going to have misfires that can be felt. You're going to have misfires that can be felt at the tailpipes. You're going to have misfires that are picked up by the onboard diagnostic system as a PO300 through a PO306, okay? O300 is multiple misfires across many cylinders. O301 through O306 are individual cylinder misfires from a certain cylinder. O306 being a cylinder 6, O301 being a cylinder 1. So in the cases where we actually do see a bad lifter that is resulting in a sound, which is very, very few and far between. It does happen, but it is very few and far between. It is typically the intake lifters from the variable valve timing plus or Variocam plus engines only. These are a lifter that is comprised of many parts. It rides on two different portions of the camshaft. Here on the outside it rides on a large lobe, and at low speed it rides on an inner lobe that is oil pressure actuated, okay? So here you can see that this lifter is able to make a bit of a sound. Now this one is actually operating correctly. It's not sticking, okay? Every time I push it in, it is coming back down, and you can hear it makes a sound, okay? Some of these engines, especially about 2,700 RPM to a trained ear, I can hear this operating as the variable valve timing plus starts to come into play, 2,700 to 3,300 RPM, I can hear this. I can hear the dynos sometimes, okay? And some of my customers have picked up on it too. It's a bit of a rattle. Almost sounds like a loose heat shield, but it does not sound like a bad lifter, okay? So I'm gonna put this kind of up next to my microphone and let you hear what a good one sounds like. Now, I can tell a difference in the bad one, and sometimes I can get this bad one to stick. So this came out of an engine that was making a noise. I diagnosed it because it had the noise, and it also had an interrupted exhaust pulse that I could pick up on. I also heard it through the intake system with a stethoscope, okay? So now I'm going to try to get this one to stick, and it's stuck, okay? If you see that there, if it was an operation, this would try to hang open when it's not supposed to. Okay? As you see, it should go back to a relaxed position. So now, what this one ends up doing, I'm going to put it back next to my microphone, is it slams shut. Listen to this. Hear a big difference? Okay? That's stuck. Now it's going to slam shut. Now this one is going to open and close normally. It's not trying to stick. Now, I'm not sure exactly what the microphone's picking up on, but the one that's sticking is much, much louder. Okay. So those are lifters that can make noise. So you have to investigate this. Now, the reason why this one is making noise is because it's multiple pieces, and it has mechanical wear. So inside this lifter, you've got a retention clip, you've got a retainer, you have a spring, you have a guide. There's a lot of pieces inside this lifter that can go bad and make noise. This is only found on the intake side of the engines with Variocam Plus that add in variable valve lift with variable valve timing. So there's always those people out there that say, that guy's a fearmonger. I'm telling you the facts, I'm delivering them to you in a direct manner. I'm very 20th century, I get straight to the point, and I let people know exactly what I think. And my direct experience is probably the reason why you're watching this video. And my direct experience tells me that in most cases, though there are some chances of variable, in most cases, you are going to come to this video because you have a lifter sound that is really a scored cylinder bore. This is not a video about bore scoring. This is a video that I'm going to send to a lot of my customers when they send me a message saying, I've got noisy lifters, or I've been told I have noisy lifters, or my shop wants to do a lifter job, or I did lifters and I still have a noise, because I have a ton of those messages. While we've been shooting this film today, I've got 6 submission tickets through the technical support side of flat6innovations.com, and none of them are from current customers, okay? So I see this constantly happen where people wonder what the noise is, and that's why we do these videos and we share this direct information with you that you can't get anywhere else, because everything else is something that's been parroted from somebody else. I'm trying to give you the direct, from the source, the guy that learned about this the hard way type of experience and type of delivery when it comes to this technical information. So all of that being said, I'm going to put another big target on my back for those that want to call me a fearmonger, and I'm going to tell you something that is going to potentially save you maybe $14,000 and may save you from having to sell your car. And that is, if you hear a noise that someone has told you is a lifter sound or a lifter tick, or you need to put some additive in your oil to get rid of that tick, more than likely that is bore scoring, and you must assume that it is. So instead of assuming that it is not bore scoring, dumping some additive in your oil or changing the oil, both of which will sometimes give you an immediate change in the behavior, which is a false change. It will come back if it's bore scoring. Even if somebody has told you that, you must go ahead and perform an invasive bore scope evaluation through the engine oil sump as well as through the spark plug hole. We have an alternate method that we can share with you about how to do that bore scope evaluation for the paid members of RenVision. It's an alternate method that's kind of a hybrid between the sump inspection and the spark plug location. We have a third way to confirm bore scoring with a bore scope. Okay? You're not going to use a leak down or a compression test as part of your evaluation, because we have learned that those can both give false information, and both of them should be avoided in favor of a bore scope visual inspection through the sump and through the spark plug hole. Nothing else is accurate when it comes to measuring bore scoring evidence in one of these engines. So as I close out this RenVision technical video, I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel, like us on Facebook, share us with your friends, and all that sort of thing. And I want you to assume, if you have that lifter ticking sound, that you have bore scoring. I want you to go through that denial period as quick as you can, get through the deliberation, and get into the decisive moment as quickly as you can to determine if you want to save this engine or if you want to sell the car like it is and disclose the problem, okay? Also, I want to give a note to buyers. If there's a car out there that you want to buy that has been diagnosed with a bad lifter, you must assume that engine has a scored cylinder bore. It is at some stage of bore scoring, and you must prove or disprove this with an invasive inspection using a bore scope. Not compression checks, not leak down checks, and not assumptions. So I'm Jake Raby for RenVision and Flat 6 Innovations. I want to thank you for joining us, and come back for more real technical information here at RenVision.